This is Leaders in the Trenches, and your host today is Gene Hammett.
Hi, my name is Gene Hammett. I am going to talk to you about vision today. How big is your vision? Well, I wanted to have someone on here who's got a really big, crazy vision. Andrew Yang is Asian. You probably figured that out. But he's also going after the presidential race in 2020. That's a really big vision. I wanted to have him on the show because he thinks about vision the way startups do. He comes from the startup culture as a serial entrepreneur, but he also is running for president on a big vision and doing something big and bold. You may not agree with everything he says. I probably don't agree with everything he says, but I do want you to think about how your vision is critical to the growth of your company. And look at what Andrew's doing and some of the things he's doing. We talk about a very specific approach of finding a leverage point. That leverage point is critical to your success. So this is the interview with Andrew Yang, the potential president of the United States in 2020. Happy to bring it to you. Here's the interview with Andrew. Andrew, how are you?
Doing well, Gene. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited to have you here at Leaders in the Trenches. I've already let the audience know a little bit about you and the background of a serial entrepreneur, but take us to where you are right now. Who are you and who are you serving these days?
Well, right now I'm running for president of the United States as a Democrat in 2020, declared my candidacy in the New York Times, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I'm running on a platform that I think would be very relevant to your listeners and viewers. I'm running on a platform that we are going through the greatest technological and economic transformation in the history of the world, and we need to make big changes to enable Americans to prosper in the new economy because we are in the process of automating away the most common jobs in the United States. We started with manufacturing since the turn of the century, and now we're heading to retail, where 30% of malls are going to close in the next 4 years. Working in retail is the most common job in the United States. The average retail worker is a 39-year-old woman who makes between $11 and $12 an hour, high school educated. It's very unclear what their next options are going to be. Truck driving, the most common job in 29 states, 3.5 million truckers, 94% male, average age 49, average education, again, high school. We're 5 to 10 years away from robot convoys of trucks, fast food, clerical work, call center work, and on and on. We are decimating the most common jobs in the country, and we need to think much, much bigger about what that's going to mean for our country and society, and that's why I'm running for president.
Whenever I think about, this whole automation and AI and everything that's coming, down the pike, I think about the new opportunities. Now, that's part of the optimist in me. I don't really think about all the negative downsides, but you're really looked at and studied the impact this is going to have on a broad economic scale, right, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I consider myself very can-do and optimistic as well. But you have to be real about what the impact is for most Americans. I mean, most Americans are not entrepreneurs. They're not going to be running their own companies. They're going to be feeling the brunt of this in communities around the country. And you can see by the numbers that already the adjustment is going terribly for many, many Americans, where the labor force participation rate right now is down to 62.9%, the same levels as El Salvador and the Dominican Republic. Fewer Americans are starting businesses. Fewer Americans are moving across state lines. Fewer Americans are even getting married or having kids, which are acts of optimism. So if you look into it, you realize that we are coming apart from the inside out because of changes in the economy. And again, I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, people who are watching this are entrepreneurs, but we know that most Americans right now can't afford an unexpected $500 bill, much less start a company. And so imagining that Americans are going to be infinitely adaptable in the face of these changes is just not borne out by the numbers.
When you think about this, I mean, we opened up in our kind of pre-roll here. We talked about the digital transformation going on here. What are the next big milestones that you see in digital transformation that we should be looking for?
Well, you see the difference based upon where people live, really, because like you're in Atlanta, which is one of the hubs, Seattle, San Francisco, Austin, the hubs. A lot of those communities are growing quickly and thriving. And then in other parts of the country, unfortunately, the benchmarks tend to be heading the other direction, where if you have, for example, AI is able to outperform a call center worker, who right now makes $14 an hour, that's going to be great for many corporations because they'll be able to lighten their expenses in terms of customer service. But then you have on the flip side 2.5 million call center workers in the United States who will probably lose many of their jobs. So the digital transformation you're talking about is going to be experienced very differently by really different regions and different parts of the country.
So, a lot of the people listening in here are business owners, and they've got, maybe a handful of employees. Some of them may have, 50 employees. Some may have 500 or more employees that they're leading. What are the things they should be concerned about in this new transformation?
Well, I've run a small company myself, a small private company that then grew to become number one in the U.S. and was acquired by a public company in 2009. And I feel for business owners right now because if they're anything like me, you're trying to grow your business, you're trying to be a good manager, a good leader, a good person, but at the same time, you start recognizing that your bottom line is being guided less and less by expanding and hiring tons of people. And it's being guided more by trying to be lean and mean and smart. And you're figuring out that you can do more with less. And so the balance for many leaders right now is figuring out what that means in terms of your organization. If you're on top of a big organization, then it's very likely that you're realizing that you probably don't need all these people around. If you're the head of a small organization, you're trying to figure out which of your people are adaptable enough that you can keep refocusing them on new tasks, even as their jobs completely change as a lot of the work's getting done more and more by machines and software.
I did read in your bio, you're in the Silicon Valley area, is that right?
Well, right now I'm in Manhattan where I live most of the time, but I've been bi-coastal for about 6 years.
Okay. My question here is, a lot of the experience you have as a serial entrepreneur and selling your company is in startup culture. Give us an idea of why we should be thinking a little bit more like startups as leaders.
Well, I love startups. I started an organization called Venture for America that trained hundreds of young entrepreneurs to head to cities around the country to start businesses. So that's how much I love startup culture. I've always been a startup guy, and I like building from the ground up. And it's certainly true in my mind that most corporate leaders need to try and take a page from that book where they start imagining if you had to start your business or division today from ground zero, what would it look like? Would it look like what you currently have? In most cases, you'll find out that it probably would look quite different. And there's someone out there who's thinking the same thing, but they do not have the same legacy organization. And so I think that this is going to be the most transformative period in American business history. And leaders need to continually reflect on how they would perform those functions if they had to start from ground zero.
So let's get into specifics. Is there something that, an exercise that you do or the way you approach that thinking of that startup culture?
My experiences have been similar to many other people I'm sure you've interviewed, is that if you give people room to run and ownership, there's nothing like it. It's very invigorating and empowering, and you can't fake it. Like either someone has a responsibility to make or break a particular role of responsibility, or they don't. It's one thing I'm enjoying running for president now is that it turns out a political campaign is very much like a startup where you have young, energized, passionate, idealistic people, and they're on the front line. And if they mess up, it's not like abstract. It's actually felt. And again, there's no substitute for real responsibility. So that's been my MO throughout my career. People tend to thrive in my experience. If you get the right people, they love responsibility.
Well, the way I look at this, Andrew, has, a lot of people talk about responsibility and not to mince your words or debate you at all, but it's about going beyond that. One of the stories I kind of share in my speeches is this whole concept of your first car that you owned. You probably remember the first color of the car you owned, right? But do you remember the rental car that you first had? You took responsibility for that rental car, but we treat that rental car completely different than the one that you owned. That's the
Yeah,
way I think about it.
yeah. Ownership culture is the key, and I'm going to suggest something that might be really dramatic,
Okay.
but it's something I believe. I'm a parent. Do you have kids yourself, Gene?
I've got an 11-year-old.
Yeah, and I mean, then you know as much as anybody. So what I'd like to suggest is that we adopt an ownership culture towards communities that are bigger than our businesses. Where if you look up and say, okay, I'm a parent, you're a parent, we're Americans, and we project forward as to what this country is going to look like for our children, for my sons and your son or daughter. So I don't know. Your 11-year-old is a
Son.
son, yeah, for my sons or your son. And I think it's very easy for anyone with their head on straight to predict that there are going to be many dramatic changes coming up that are not going to serve many, many Americans well at all. And so then if you think bigger about, okay, let's say I'm I'm like an owner of this country, which I think as citizens we are, then what might we do differently? And to me, the biggest thing we could do as owners of this country is to declare a dividend for all citizens. Because if you look forward, you see that we're going to decimate the most commonly held jobs in the economy, and that right now 57% of Americans can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. So Americans' ability to adjust, to move, to retrain, to start new businesses, it's going to be very, very low. And so what we need to do is we need to give every citizen some of the same sense of ownership that you've had, that I've had, that entrepreneurs have in dealing with their businesses. And by doing that, we could invigorate our culture and society in terms of entrepreneurship and creativity on levels that we've never seen.
So this is a transition into this universal income prospect. So tell us a little bit about what that is and how you see that working.
Sure. So my policy is the freedom dividend, which is a universal basic income of $1,000 per month for every adult in America, every adult citizen between the ages of 18 and 64. Now, this seems dramatic, but Thomas Paine was for this in the beginning of the country. And in later years, Martin Luther King was for it. Milton Friedman was for it. 1,000 economists signed a letter saying this would be great for the economy and society. And it even passed the House of Representatives in 1971. In one state, Alaska, adopted it in 1982, where now everyone in Alaska gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year in an oil dividend, and it's wildly popular in a very conservative state, has created thousands of new jobs, improved children's health, and has reduced income inequality. So what I ask people is, what is the oil of the 21st century? And everyone watching this knows that it's technology, it's big data, it's AI, it's autonomous vehicles. So we can do what Alaska's done with oil for the entire country with the incredible advances in new technologies. And without that kind of dividend, most Americans will not experience the benefits of all of these advances that we're making.
So I get an idea of what it is, and I know you probably understand the counterpoints to this. What are the downsides to this universal income?
You know, the downsides are fairly minimal in my mind, because there are a lot of myths where people think like, oh, people won't work anymore, even though the data does not suggest that, and that $1,000 a month is still below the U.S. poverty line of $12,770 a year. So no one's going to quit their job on that. In studies, only two groups have worked less: new moms who spend more time with their kids, and teenagers who spend more time in school and graduate high school at higher levels. So you can very clearly see the benefits in terms of nutrition and education and business formation and economic growth. And then the downsides are essentially phantoms, where as soon as you dig, you realize that people aren't all going to quit their jobs on $1,000 a month, and there's not going to be massive inflation and like all of these boogeymen. Because the truth is that right now we're in a culture that emphasizes resource scarcity, where it's like, hey, there's not enough to go around, and if you get some, then I somehow don't get as much. And what really good leaders, and many of the people watching this have already done in their own organizations, is to have a growth mindset and a mindset of abundance, where there's more to go around if we invest in people and then grow the pie. Good companies invest in their people to grow themselves and have better performance. But in the public sector, we think, oh, people are a cost. We can't spend money on that kid. We can't spend money on those groups. And we have to reverse that scarcity mindset to a mindset of true abundance for really the country writ large.
So I want to kind of mention this to you before, and this goes back. One of my mentors has been on my show before, made this reference to the 2016 election, and I thought he was crazy. And I thought he was just completely out of his mind. But he's like, looking back at the Obama years, the next president will be the opposite. Whatever you view as the choice in front of you is the opposite of what Obama was. And I think that came true with Trump being elected in 2016. When you think about your presidential run, you're so opposite Mr. Trump, President Trump, if you will. That's a good thing in my perspective. Tell us a little bit more about why that's such a necessary thing to think about, the opposite of what we currently have.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And it's been said, Gene, the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes but I would also suggest that what we need to do is we need to try and solve the problems that got Donald Trump elected. Why is Donald Trump our president today? It's, to me, plain as day that the reason he's president is that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, all of the swing states he needed to win that were purple all went to Trump because we blasted away millions of manufacturing jobs that were centered in those states. And now we're about to do the same thing to millions of retail workers, call center workers, fast food workers, truck drivers, and on through the economy. And that is the problem set that we need to address. That's the opposite. So Donald Trump's solutions are we should freeze time, turn the clock backwards, and blame immigrants and build walls.
Let's bring back coal. Right?
Yes. And what we all know, what everyone watching this knows, is that what we need to do is the exact opposite of that. We need to move the clock forwards, accelerate our society, accelerate our government, accelerate and invest in our people, and that is the best way forward. So I couldn't agree with you more that I am the opposite of Donald Trump, and that's why I'm going to win. That's why I'm going to be president of the United States in 2021.
Well, Andrew, I wanted to have you on here mainly because you're a big thinker. Like the fact that you are doing something about what we're talking about, this economy, our growth, our nation, something needs to be done. And I really appreciate you being here. I do want to ask you something kind of different than what we've been talking about. We're recording this. It's almost December. A lot of people think about goals. Do you have any special rituals or practices that you use when you're setting goals?
My magic, and it's not magic at all, is just to write it down. Like, it turns out if you write it down, the odds of you doing it are much, much higher. And then you refer to it periodically. And somehow, on some level, you just end up moving yourself toward those goals. I had a list of goals I wrote down in my early 20s, some of which were quite ridiculous, honestly, where you'd look at it being like, you're going to run a company of this size, or you're going to do what to who. But then it turns out most of them I've accomplished, and I found myself just moving in those directions for years. Some of those goals took years and years. So the magic to me is just writing them down.
Well, let's go beyond that a little bit, Andrew. Like, a lot of people are tempered by what they know how to do, what they believe might be possible. And for you to set out and say, I'm going to be the president of the United States, I mean, I understand your drive for this, but it's a big goal. Like, there's not many bigger ones for someone that has aspirations like this. So how would you suggest people to look at goals that they think are too big for their abilities?
What I've found is that people really, really want to follow a vision. And if you have a vision for your business or organization or community, and then you say, hey, it's going to be like this, most people will look at you and be like, interesting. And then they'll be like, shrug, and then they'll go about their day. And then if they come back like a little while later, and then you made progress toward that vision, then they'll look up and be like, maybe I should actually listen. Maybe I should do something to help this person. Maybe I should associate myself with this person, because now I'm somewhat like pleased by the fact that like maybe I'll know someone who made this thing happen. And that's really the way leadership functions a lot of the time. So I declared my candidacy for the presidency, like you said, very big, lofty goal. But then people looked at it and said, well, he's right about the problems. Like he's thinking about the solutions and he's thinking at the right level and the right scale. Maybe I should do something to help him. And so because of that, now I've gotten tens of thousands of donations. The average donation size has only been $11. So my fans are even cheaper than Bernie's fans, which is great. I mean, I'll take it. And so one of the things that I've found over my career is like you set a vision and that helps get people on board. And the next thing is you build towards that vision and you evince commitment yourself. So in my case, quit my job, step down as CEO of the organization I founded, put money into my own campaign, have been traveling the country and working around the clock. And then people respond to that. People can sense when you're actually putting your heart and soul into something. And then what I've found is that you can do amazing things if you get the right people on board, because the right people are attracted to the right vision.
Well, that brings you back to that startup culture again, which vision is always such a big part of having that culture and engaging people. And I'm sure as you're building out your staff here for this presidential election, that vision, having a clear vision of how you actually can get there has been, incredible to be able to get the right people.
One thing I'm going to suggest, Gene, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So you learn, I'm running for president. You go in, you think, hey, this is like impossible. You might think, because we've got these giant pipes, they're clogged full of money. The whole thing's like $1 billion infrastructure mess in terms of our political organizations. Like it's like disintegrating into dysfunction. It's terrible. But like other systems, and I found this as an entrepreneur, you probe and then you figure out what the key leverage points are. You figure out what the vulnerabilities in the system are. So I figured out the vulnerabilities in America's political system. And it is the state of Iowa, where if you climb through the porthole, you wind up in Iowa, and then you find a state of 3.1 million Iowans who are incredibly passionate and activated about politics, but have a very, very high commitment voting system, the caucus system. So out of 3.1 million Iowans, only 170,000 participated in the Democratic caucus in 2016. We're talking about between 5 and 6% of the state. So how many Iowans do I need, Andrew Yang, to get on board with the fact that they need to get $1,000 a month to counteract the fact that all of their Main Street stores are closing because of Amazon? Out of 170,000, I might need 20 to 30,000 to finish first in Iowa, because it's going to be a very crowded field. I've been to Iowa 6 times. There's a video of me speaking to 1,000 Iowans at an event. I can get 20 to 30,000 Iowans on board with this vision of a human-centered trickle-up economy that helps rebuild their Main Street. And if I do that, I'm on the fast track to become president of the United States of America. So you look at it and it starts out as this enormous challenge, just like a lot of businesses, but then you break it down into its component parts and it becomes very, very achievable.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all this with us. It was very, very interesting for our guest here. Different kind of conversation than we have on the show, but I really appreciate you being here. If our guests wanted to find out more about you, Andrew, where should we send them?
Yeah, just go to my website, my campaign's website, yang2020.com, or Google Andrew Yang and I'll pop up. But we know that we are going through the greatest economic and technological transformation in the history of the world. And our leaders need to wake up, because right now our response to these changes is to pretend they're not happening. The third inning led to Donald Trump. What will the fourth, fifth, and sixth innings look like? The entrepreneurs of this country and the leaders of this country need to chart a new path for our economy and our country. And that's what I'd love your help in doing. So again, yang2020.com, but let's make it happen together. And appreciate the opportunity of being here, Gene.
Thanks, Andrew. And thanks for being here at Leaders in the Trenches.
My pleasure.
What a great conversation. I really was curious about how he thought about this. And, I know he's put a lot into it, the data and the research and everything that goes into this. And I Probably don't agree with all the things he says. I don't know how the universal income would work, but I do see some value to change. And we've got to look at disruption from different perspectives. We can't just force things through the way they used to be done. And so your business is probably critical for growth if you think about doing things differently. Hopefully this interview helped you. I appreciate it because I got to talk to someone who has a really big vision and who is doing something to make that happen. You probably feel very similar in the work that you're doing. Now, if you have any questions about being a courageous leader, if you want to reach out and just connect, or you think of someone that would be amazing for the show, make sure you reach out to me at gene@genehammett.com. And as always, lead with courage, and I'll see you next time.